Today, my guest is author Thomas de Zengotita, continuing our series on his book, Mediated.
You take on an ideology, it starts to do your thinking for you. So everything that comes along, instead of encountering it and having a human immediate, thinking about it, you say, oh, where does this fit in my already preconceived picture of how do things work?
Mm-hmm.
And once your mind is doing that automatically, then you're not really thinking anymore. You're kind of a zombie.
This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you are welcome. You know the drill. Please subscribe, rate, comment, share, reach out, tell your friends, send smoke signals, whatever. We love your feedback and we want to hear from you. If you like our work and want to support us, the best way to do that is join Phetasy.com. You'll get access to behind-the-scenes content, outtakes, discounts on merch, and the ability to submit questions for some of our upcoming guests. Support your favorite scrappy little internet heroes at Phetasy.com.
Hey guys, Michael Malice here. Be sure to check out my weekly podcast, You're Welcome with Michael Malice, now on Podcast One. You might know me from my terrible Twitter, my horrible books, or the nonsense I spout on podcasts like Rogan and Glenn Beck. It's all there. Are you black-pilled or white-pilled for the future of the UK? What is a man?
What is a man?
What is a no? What is the? Are you white pilled or black pilled? No seriousness, Carl.
No. I love the Jesse Lee piece of question.
The fact that you discovered that gives me hope for some of the things that I've still got that are missing.
Well, if you need James G. Blaine's autograph, you are welcome to it. Of course, being the co-author of How to Have Impossible Conversations makes you the perfect guest for this train wreck of a show. New episodes are available every Thursday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podcast One, and wherever you get your podcasts. You are welcome.
The leading techie in some educational tech thing I was consulting for a while, he thought the word politics. I said, so-and-so's the political, he's always got a political, and he literally thought that the word political meant manipulative. I was saying the guy was politically motivated in what he was doing. He cared about equity and blah, blah, blah. I said, he's not just an educational administrator. He's political. He's committed. And the guy goes, he's not political, meaning that he's straightforward and honest and not manipulative. He thought the word political meant manipulative. That's how far away from
Okay, well, for those of you just joining us, we just got right into it. I'm with Thomas de Zengotita, and we're back with our series on his book, Foreshadowing the Future, Mediated, breaking it down chapter by chapter. This chapter on identity politics might be a two-part series in and of itself, because even rereading that chapter, I like to try and think of how these things that you covered even back in 2005 have evolved since then. And a lot of the stuff that you talk about in this chapter, it's almost like it's been it's like the Incredible Hulk. It ends up, it's so much bigger and more monstrous than it seems positively quaint what you were writing about.
That's right. That's very true. But it was the seeds of it all.
It was the seeds of it all. When this chapter starts and you're talking about political apathy, basically.
Yeah.
And
that was the big thing in the 90s.
Yeah. What do you, I want to ask you what you think about political apathy since how has that shifted or changed since you wrote this chapter?
Well, now I haven't been in the classroom, so I haven't been with young people using them as my field work, which is what I did my whole career, right? I couldn't have written the book without paying attention to my students' lives. That was the whole. But it's been over 5 years since that, so I can't I can't be sure of this now today, but towards the end of the last 10 years or so of my people were extremely political, but political almost entirely meant finding ways to get your voice heard, and that the group of people or the cause that you identify with getting attention for it.
Right.
Okay. And this, I believe, applied much more broadly to politics in general. The amount of energy that used to go into on the ground political organizing. Now, there's groups of people who are going back to organizing and street work and everything like that. I'm not denying that, but they're reacting to what I'm talking about. So it was almost as if you managed to get yourself and your group a platform where you felt like you were being heard, that was your goal. And what exactly was supposed to happen sort of organizationally on the ground in the nitty-gritty of everybody's everyday life was not an afterthought, but wasn't the energy wasn't going into that. And then when you did get a platform, again, I'm talking almost entirely right now about identity politics as I encountered it in my last years teaching at NYU and teaching these special courses at the Dalton School, admittedly a very elite, unrepresented, but nevertheless, a very liberal place, very diverse, so the amount of time that was spent, the energy that was spent, the teachers who were politically committed were all, creating safe spaces in their offices, and the conversations were almost entire. It wasn't all about gender fluidity. It wasn't as much about that then as it is today. The whole trans bathrooms and athletes. That wasn't at the front of the agenda then, but LBGTQ plus was. And right alongside it were, Black, Latino. What about Asia? Us Asian,
Yeah.
And so it was really horrifyingly similar to a bunch of actors going out and auditioning to get parts. I mean, the amount of energy that went into self-promotion in the cause of equity and justice, not out of ego. I'm not claiming that. A lot of old-fashioned liberal lefty types, where my roots are. I mean, Tony Judd, for example, I could go on. I'm talking about really smart, committed people have misread identity politics and see it as a sort of political expression of neoliberal consumerism. So that what they think they're looking at is a bunch of people who are, wearing their politics the way they might wear the latest. I wish I could have just the right name at the tip of my tongue for fashion, whatever. And and I think that's a terrible misreading of it. To the extent that it's true because that's the only way you can function in this world, is to present yourself and represent yourself. But these people have been hurt. They've lived on the margins of our society. They've been damaged. And they are demanding a place in the world as a human being.
Right.
And that's the original left-wing political thing, as far as I'm concerned. So I don't buy the idea that this is all about me, the way a lot of traditional lefties do. It's all about me and us in our group demanding to be treated as human beings. It was a stroke of genius when they changed gay marriage, the movement to marriage equality, renaming it marriage equality. both did justice to what the thing was about, but it also called upon sort of the deepest unifying theme in progressive politics, going back to the 18th century.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the book, you say the same array of causes amounted to a battery on demands they couldn't possibly meet, which is that whatever sensibility that I think I grew
Yeah,
up with.
that's right.
Although I would say, from talking to younger people and seeing my nephews, I don't know that they have that same Gen X apathy that I grew
That's what
up
I'm
with.
saying. They don't.
Yeah,
They I lived
seem
through that transition from the 90s but the thing that fired everybody up politically, the main thing, was when identity politics took over from social justice left-wing politics. Although, Bernie and his people got in there. I mean, they had a place in the platform too.
It's everywhere. I mean, you see it even on the right wing, just in terms of making, the kind of grievances of the
Yeah,
Rust Belts being left behind,
you
and
nailed it. You
and
nailed it.
everybody
You nailed it. And
takes part
this
in
is
this
the
now.
most important of all the developments that we could point to, really, on the right, not the left. And people whose idea of politics strayed from the original general humanist equity program and became identity politics on the left have a lot of mirror looking to do, because they've been trumped, pun intended, by identity politics on the right. And identity politics has been so much more powerful and effective than anyone could have expected. Reagan was a right-wing identity politician, but he was like so gentle about it compared to what's happened since. And finally, it's not just the United States. It's all
Right.
over the damn world on the right.
So
Putin is
wouldn't this
presenting
be
himself as a representative of traditional Orthodox Russian church values. And his closest ally is the prelate of the Russian Orthodox Church.
Wouldn't this be something then that has existed in some form? I mean, or is that populism?
No, actually, well, there's two ways to answer that. The populism part of this is that ordinary people of the right wing type, not the activist lefties who are educated and college degrees and all full of themselves and want to save the world and all that. In other words, not the legacy of the 60s. Just regular guys and women who are living their lives, doing the plumbing, driving the trucks,
Right.
they became
Waiting.
politicized because identity politics began to work for them. And the reason Trump was such a huge success, it's in all the polls. I don't know why people didn't, is if you talk just every single regular non-college degree white person, the profile of the Trump supporter said, he talks like I do. He says things that I think, but we're not supposed to say. I don't dare, he's speaking out. He's saying what I think and feel. You can't get any more performative political showbiz politics than that.
Yeah, that's the other interesting thing in this book is you talk about how for people coming of age in the 80s, 90s, politics came to mean presentations. What did politics mean before?
Well, the shift started in the 60s. So when I refer to these people coming of an age in the 80s and 90s, I'm talking about people whose teachers were 60s people, whether they were literally teachers in their classrooms or not. And in the 60s, people began to, there was a famous chant that we did. I was a very active person in the 60s, although I was homeless there. I was out there against everything I'm supposed to be, but I couldn't find a group to be for.
You were politically homeless?
I was, just like you. That's why I know what it feels like.
It's disorienting.
It's because in my case, I was, I did so much reading about it. I wasn't as disoriented. In other words, I understood my homelessness. And it amounted to, I can't buy ideologies of any kind. And this isn't me or Adorno, Horkheimer, the Frankfurt School analysis of ideology is the right. So you take on an ideology, it starts to do your thinking for you. So everything that comes along, instead of encountering it and having a human immediate, thinking about it, you say, oh, where does this fit in my already preconceived picture of how the things work? And once your mind is doing that automatically, and this is what happened in the 80s and the 90s, then once your mind starts to do that automatically, then you're not really thinking anymore. You're kind of a zombie.
I'll give you an example of this. Somebody, just in regards to our podcasting, I think someone was like, I haven't been able to catch up on this podcast and his book. And someone else said, I Googled him. I'll do the work for you. I Googled him. He's a Marxist. So you can pretty much dismiss anything that he has to say.
Well, I confess to being a socialist, but
and I was like, I was laughing because I was like, this is the world we live in, where you can just compartmentalize someone based on like a Wikipedia or one quote or something. And then you're like, I dismiss every other opinion they have, even if it's on parenting or anything.
Exactly. Really, true. And again, just think about it in terms of the attention economy, which is what they're all talking about now, although I've got a whole chapter in the book about competing for attention. That's what identity politics is. You can't, if you can't package what you're saying in such a way as to speak more or less immediately in soundbite form to the people are going to react the way to the group who's going to immediately identify with whatever you say, then you're not going to be heard at all. If you have anything complicated to say that's going to take more than an hour for someone to absorb and think about, you don't have a chance.
I do think podcasting pushes back against that.
I agree with you.
I do. My joke is podcasts are going to save the world, but because you have these long form, and if you have the time, I did a poll on how much time people listen to podcasts, and people who drive for a living, moms who are folding clothes. I was shocked at how many hours of podcasts people
are
listen
listening to your podcast, though, as compared to stories and crime.
Not anywhere near. No. And I'm in an arena where I don't have a name. I'm not like some big name.
But are there any other people who are doing your sort of thing who have huge followings?
Yeah, I would say like, a good example of someone who I think is recently in the news, who pivoted out of the mainstream and is announced yesterday or this past week, Barry Weiss is launching her media company. She actually, in a quote, said something about how she feels a lot of people are politically homeless. And she has she already has a big name, and so she is doing similar conversations, I think, but she has access to like Netanyahu.
Can you get to her?
Oh no, Barry and I are friends and we know each other, and she's been on this podcast. So I think I find a lot of hope in the rise of independent media. I see people like Matt Taibbi, I think, did such a great job when he was reporting on Trump during when Trump was rallying. Matt was going to all of his rallies, and he was saying like speaking of identity politics, there was never a referendum on globalization, and these people have grievances that you can't just dismiss as like, oh, you're racist.
That's right.
And he was trying to scream to the left and say if you get on the ground and talk to these people.
I'm totally with you. And that's a good example of the flip side of this. Oh, he's a Marxist. Oh, he's a Trump. To forget, nothing to say. I mean, it's just, J.D. Vance has, gone down the rabbit hole and swallowed the red pill. But his book, the actual book, did a lot to open up a lot of liberal minds to, what's really going on out there, and that makes Trump possible. Again, I would just add to those of your viewers, I guess it is now, who care about this stuff. It's just so important to remember that this is happening in Hungary, in Russia, in Brazil, all over the world. And the reason it's happening all over the world is that these media that we're talking about, the book's called Mediated, right? The media that we're talking about are all over the world. So the underlying cause of this reflexive identity political thing that's going on, whether it's in Russia or, the underlying cause is that people now exist in a sort of a reflexive look at me feedback loop. It's all about me. This is where the world becomes a really great writer. The world becomes a stage on which literally people perform their political identities, and it is and the social media, which has such promise, especially in its podcast form, is also responsible for the reflexivity that brought identity politics to the front end of this.
Watkins Welcome is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. Yep, while you're listening to me talk, you're probably also driving, cleaning, exercising, or maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not in some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you can be doing right now. Getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy, and you could save money by doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save over $700 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles on your policy, being a homeowner, and more. So just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com and join the over 27 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National annual average insurance savings by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2020 and May 2021. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations. Yeah, it's weird. On my optimistic days, I see like the rise of independent media and people feeling more and more like they don't belong to either or ideology as a good thing, and people wanting more nuance, and the rise of podcasts and people able to listen to different podcasts from the guys on the left, from the Obama bros to Megyn Kelly to me and Rogan, and it's just you can get a pretty good smattering of opinions if you have the time. But then on the short term, it seems like everything is more polarized. You talk about just how political action means getting attention, and this story, you're talking about the OJ story in this chapter and how things changed and it became the reality merged with the story, and that became the story. People were talking, and I see now there isn't that shared. I mean, I think if you exist in a space where you're able to take in, you're not just watching one Maddow or Fox or whatever, you can see how every story that breaks or every reality that's unfolding,
that's the way to talk
there's
about
two
it.
stories. There are two stories being presented about that reality.
That you just made is the whole point. Every reality that happens then gets transformed into a story which is conditioned by these ideological, to address a certain identity group.
And when you watch that, it does feel like you're living in two Americas simultaneously.
Several, but yes.
They're more than
Yeah,
one,
yeah,
obviously, but those are the
yeah. No, but I
dominating,
understand. I was just joking.
yeah, no, it's I don't think the
So
other ones have as much.
these podcasts of yours and the others, which are you correctly saying, there's weirdly in the middle of the TikTok universe, this same media has created long form reflexive formats in
Mhm.
which it really does become possible for people who have the time. You keep saying that, and you better, because I know you know this, but one of the later chapters, like the last chapter, busy, 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 too busy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for people who have the time to pay, serious attention to events and really think about them themselves. um, and I agree with you. That's very hopeful.
I love this quote in here where you talk about kids today have been subjected to thousands and thousands of high impact images of misery and injustice in every corner of the globe before they're old enough to drive. The producers of these images compete with each other to arouse as much horror and pity and outrage as possible, hoping that this encounter with a person dying of AIDS, or that documentary about sweatshop labor, or these photographs of recently skinned baby seals will mobilize commitment. But what the cumulative experience has actually mobilized in the majority is that characteristic ironic distancing that aging activists mistook for apathy. But it wasn't apathy as much as it was psychological numbness, a general defense against representational intrusions of all kinds, especially painful ones. I mean, who wants to look at pictures of skinned baby
Yeah.
seals? I was just talking about this with a friend because her kids were off running, playing with the neighbor kids, and they came back white as ghosts because some of the older neighbor kids were playing TikTok videos of cats being hung and stuff. So this is even this fact of what we grew up with, these presentations, has given way to just real videos. They're not
Yeah.
even
I
produced.
understand the difference. Yes. And
So how do you think kids are dealing with that kind of psychological numbness?
again, I'm 5 years out of date at least, but the way that during the transition to identity politics as we recognize it today, with the issues involving LGBTQ, or is Harvard admissions policy, should we end affirmative action at Harvard so that Asians aren't discriminated against? All of those sorts of issues have elicited serious commitments from people in the niches that they appeal to. So if I'm understanding your question, the apathy of the 90s through the chemistry of identity politics gradually said to people, okay, if you care, care about this and this only, and throw yourself into this. And
Mhm.
so there is a new level of commitment, as far as I can tell, among a
Yes.
very significant swath of young people ranging in age from 14 to 30,
Mhm.
all over the place. But usually the commitment takes the form of it's hyper focused on, like, bathroom access or whatever.
Right.
And we understand why that had to happen, because go back to your perfect rendition of what I was saying about numbness. So many of these things coming out, you can't pause, So
Yeah.
and that's the apathy. But then,
Yeah.
caring people go, wait a minute. I care about the damn seals. So I'm going into Greenpeace, and I'm going up to the Arctic in a boat, and I'm going to, block the trawlers that are, right? But so they pick
It does
one thing.
seem like
Go ahead.
it does seem like the youth are more
Very
active,
much so.
than we weren't that.
No.
I always joke. I'm like,
There's some real activism out there. But if I'm right, and this is an impression now, I'm not reporting from the ground the way I used to when I was writing the book. I mean, I'm not having daily conversations with the actual. But my impression is that the activism is hyper focused,
and hyper performative.
hyper performative still, but hyper focused on one thing.
Mhm.
It could be, climate change is one thing. Like, it doesn't matter what, but and the kind of general political critique of a whole social system gets lost in the blizzard of divergent commitments to specific things. And if I was doing one of these reflective I mean, I wouldn't do it but I can't. I don't have time. But there we go. But I'm writing about it, and if somehow or other these people focused on seals and focused on climate change or focused on specific things, trans thing, the bathrooms, the sports, all of them. Some of them are much more complicated than other ones. It's not simple to do the girls' sports. That's not a simple thing. But anyway, people engaged in all of that, if they could just find an intellectual place that would allow them to see these specific things that they care about as part of a coherent world of injustice, and start to ask themselves, in addition to the specific issues that they care about, what would it take? What does it take to arouse what I personally talk about optimism? I personally think that most of us, in all of these little niches, are animated by, I know this wouldn't call it natural, but I have to put it in quotes because it leads to all kinds of ecological, biological stuff. But, a natural sense.
Evolutionary
Yeah,
biologists
all
will
that.
come for you.
I can't go there, for reasons that I've written about. But, it feels like a natural sense of justice. And indeed, the book I'm writing about now is I'm trying to identify just exactly what that natural sense of justice is, apart from whatever innate biologically based instincts we've got. And I mean, it's not hard. It's not right. Anybody who's ever been around kids, whether it's a teacher or a
Knows what jerks
parent,
they
it's
are.
not, well, that too. And that leads to, it's not fair.
Yeah. It's not fair, but also I was raised, and I joke about this a lot with the kids these days, not to sound like a curmudgeon, but I joke about, like, what happened to learning that life isn't fair. There's this whole discussion around the difference between equity versus equality, whereas equality is more equity is based
Gotcha.
on outcomes.
Yeah, gotcha.
And that's
People
a
are
big
not
shift
actually
that's
naturally
occurred.
equal. You have to be
Right.
called to play basketball. I understand, okay, and that's basically a right wing argument, which I'm completely open to, because I think I have a really deep left wing response to that, and a classic left response. That
Is it a right-wing argument though? Because I hear that more coming from, like, classical liberals than I do right-wingers.
Life isn't fair.
That equity versus equality, that distinction is
Well,
important, that you can't try and control for outcomes.
classical liberals are now represent when you put them up against identity politics, which is looking for equity as an immediate outcome, then classical liberals are actually conservative in their view that there really are differences between people, and that meritocracies have a reason to exist for what they are, and they tend to be willing to defend standards of excellence which will keep some people out of some institutions and let other people into them because they get high scores on this or that. That's now a classical liberal position. You're right. But within the context of the demand for equity as an outcome, a more or less immediate outcome, that's a conservative position. And in general, people taking conservative positions, I won't say conservative, people taking conservative positions tend to say things like, look, this is the way things are. If you're 5'8", you're not going to play unless you're Mookie. I can't remember the guy who's amazing basketball player.
Right.
And you're not going to, play professional basketball. And I just mentioned that one because it's such a simple one that no one could, and classical liberals.
So what is your left-wing answer
My
to
left-wing
this?
answer to that is it's perfectly natural for people to get sick and die. That doesn't mean we don't want medicine. I seriously, I feel like yelling that. Let's suppose it turned out to be the case that.
But how now apply that to the basketball analogy?
Well, the specific basketball analogy, the application would be something like, let's have a short people's league. But I leave the basketball aside right now, and think about things like this. I mean, real political complicated things. Suppose it turned out to be true. And Margaret Mead, who was my teacher, believed this. I'm citing her because whenever I say this, I get, well, hopefully I won't ruin your show, but I just get hammered. Suppose it turned out to be true that by nature, and now I am talking about biology. Now I am talking about testosterone and upper body strength and size and so on. Suppose it turned out to be true that male dominance has been and remains more or less universal over cultures after cultures after cultures, all through history and down, because nature doesn't give a shit about equity and equality and justice.
Yeah, I had someone on my podcast, Louise Perry, who wrote this book, The Case Against the Sexual Revolution, and she said the biggest misogynist is Mother Nature.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm putting a suppose in front of it because I think the jury's still out on what this would all really mean. But Margaret, no less a woman, and an incredibly powerful woman than Margaret Mead, believed that there were these innate differences involving aggression and strength between men and women, that no matter how hard you tried politically and culturally and socially to iron things out and make things fairer, it was just going to keep coming back because these goddamn boys, all you have to do is look out in the yard and the girls are all gathered in a group kind of chattering with each other about something or other, and the boys are all running around with sticks beating up bushes.
Yeah.
So I'm quoting her, right?
Yeah, no, go on. Remind me to ask you if you've seen something.
Just because that's true, if that turned out to be true, that doesn't mean we shouldn't fight against it and work as hard as we can to make a society in which those natural differences, their effect on how resources, opportunities, and so on are deployed in society are minimized as much as we can.
And I would argue that's more the 60s, ideals of equality. Oh, hello, Hope. My dog just entered. Than equity.
Yeah,
I would say that
it goes deeper than much longer back than the 60s. But yes, this is not an immediate equity outcome point of view. This is if you want justice in the world, a world that is not just by nature, all you got to do is read Nietzsche and this Perry woman, I guess. I mean, it's the world is not just by nature. Life is unfair. Nature doesn't give a shit who's stronger,
Mhm.
smarter, big, So if we want, for our human reasons, by human I mean conscious, ethical, historic, if we want for human reasons to, just the way we want medicine, because we don't want people getting sick and suffering if they don't have to. In exactly the same way, we don't want all sorts of unfairness in our society if it doesn't have to be there. If there are,
Mhm.
reasonable and fair ways to accommodate it, to make it more likely that more people will be able to more uh, fulfill themselves more in the world and better and lead more fruitful lives.
Mhm.
That's what we want. Well, we can still work for it. It doesn't matter if nature's not with us. Exactly
Yeah,
like with medicine.
it's interesting because there's a strange bedfellows, and I hate to go into this. It's the tip of the spear for this conversation though, but and you brought up the sports thing and this conversation around fairness. Radical feminists are very much like, why is it women who have to just suck it
Yeah.
up and say, okay, you can beat me at swimming, trans woman, and not aren't allowed to kind of push back and say that's not fair in this idea of fairness, what's fair to. So radical feminists, it's not just like right-wing people who push back
No,
against
no,
some of
no, of
this
course
trans
not. Of course
ideology.
not.
The left, I would say left-wing feminists were actually first to be, they're called TERFs, like the trans exclusionary radical feminists existed long before I think these right-wingers suddenly took up the cause. I'm like, these guys don't give a shit about women.
Exactly, and that's the difference.
Like,
Don't ever forget that.
I always say, like, I always say with the guys who are on the right wing who are like, "What is the
Yeah,
definition of a woman?"
exactly,
And then it's like
exactly,
a adult female.
exactly,
I say it's an adult human
yeah,
female or
yeah,
whatever, and then I say, but it should also have who's making me a
yes,
sandwich, like
yes,
underneath.
yeah, and but it's so important to see the difference between. I didn't know the jargon. I'm not up to date, but the radical feminist opposition to trans sports stuff, whatever it amounts to. Uh, it is so important to see the difference between the opposition that's coming from that place and the opposition that's coming from this right wing place, which is just jumping on this issue because they know they can exploit it and use it for their various nefarious purposes. The radical feminist opposition to trans participation in sports is coming from a place where they really care about women.
Yeah, I mean, I've been joking forever, like the patriarchy's so crafty, they'll turn themselves into women so that they can stay on top. Not a popular joke on the
No,
left
no, no,
wing,
no, no.
but
But again, what that means to me is that it's least imaginable that radical feminist opposition to trans participation in sports could be represented by people who would be able to have a serious conversation with trans people who want to participate in these sports
Mhm.
for their perfectly good reasons. And there should be the possibility of a real productive dialogical resolution. I think, well, okay, but
I mean, I can tell you that basically turf is a derogatory term, and there's a lot of very violent rhetoric online being directed at turfs because they see them as um essentially fascist. So I would think, I would like to think that there would be this conversation, but it seems like everything, speaking of identity
I
politics.
was talking about a possibility, but look, I don't really. I need to shut up on this because I don't. You've read all this stuff. You've heard all the quote. I haven't. I,
Well, I think it's an interesting topic that comes up a lot because it is the tip of the spear where all
yeah,
of these identity politics and people in various tribes or whatever they're identifying themselves with are very easily able to self ID, no pun intended, as, you know, they can say like, this is who I am based on how I feel about this, which is this danger of identity politics, because very that very process is what destroys the ability to have a nuanced conversation about something
Yeah,
like this.
scattered among those people are some individuals who also care about justice, period. Capital
Mhm,
J,
mhm,
regardless of who it is. And
right.
people who care about justice, capital J, regardless of who it is, people who really believe that a little baby born right now in the middle of the swamp in some Southeast Asian country without a chance of getting anything anywhere in the world, people who really believe that that little life is as valuable as the lives of the children that are being born in our hospitals, and the people who really believe that. And I really believe that. That's not to say I don't live up to it,
Mhm,
but I really believe that. That's the ticket of admission to a serious conversation. And
mhm.
people who don't just don't belong in the conversation at all. And I'm just saying that there are scattering within these groups, more on the left than on the right, but some on the right too. I'm not denying that, but more on the left than on
Mhm.
the right. There are some people who really do believe in some ideal of human universal justice for all.
I would say there are probably more on the right than we might think
That's why I hesitated.
because of just like Christian outreach, for
There you go.
example.
There you
And
go. I
people,
hesitated. I'm hesitant.
yeah, I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that Christians in particular,
Okay.
for
I'm
example,
open to it.
put more actual boots on the
Nicholas
ground and make an
Kristof,
effort.
of whom I am a fan, he's back writing columns for the Times after an unsuccessful run for governor of Oregon. Uh, Kristof believes just exactly what you said because he spent years of his life among religious people who are doing good works in the most desolate, devastated places on earth and
Mhm.
sacrificing their whole lives for justice, and just the way you just said. So that's they're in the conversation too. I mean, in other words, that's. But so what I'm ultimately aiming at as a sort of leverage point for looking at identity politics as a recent manifestation of what has always been politics that's now so inflected by the reflexivity of mediated me-ness, that we've got what we've got. I'm just saying there's only one place we can go to even get intellectual and ethical leverage on the discussion, let alone practical interventions. And that's the place where you say, all right, I don't live this, but I believe that everyone's as valuable as everyone else.
But isn't that part of the problem in terms of what I see as a lot of couch
Yes,
activism and beliefs versus
yes,
boots on the
yes,
ground action?
yes,
Because of
yes,
this representation and constant flattery,
yes,
people get a lot of dopamine
yes,
and accolades and rewards
yes,
for doing not that
yes.
much. I mean, I say rewards in a quote because it might be more followers or more retweets. I don't
Gotcha.
know that that's
Thumbs
an
up.
actual
Yes,
reward.
yes.
Yeah. So it's
The
I
problem.
mean, I guess something I contemplate a lot is that distance between our beliefs and our actions seems to be getting more and more fragmented with this technology and identity
Fragmented,
politics
yes.
as well.
Not less intent, not less of it, but fragmented, yes. It is.
Where you can pretend to be this person as we present online. You know, you see that Instagram is a great example of this, where you see everybody's presentation of their life as a mother or as a whatever everybody's an influencer now.
Absolutely.
And how much of that is, you'll have my friend is like, oh, I follow this
You
organizer,
are now a
and
curated being.
but I'm like, she has help. She's got like people cleaning her house, and
Right.
it's not like
Good
she's
for
just
you,
doing
Bridget.
this on her own.
Good for you, Bridget.
So I think that there's an interesting discussion to be had about what we're presenting and what we believe versus, I always joke like reality remains undefeated. We can say whatever we want. We can believe whatever we want,
Nice.
but reality will still.
Nice.
And again, another thing that is cause for optimism for me has been what we're seeing, this unrest in like Iran, and a lot of that is media. In China, you're seeing, those student protests that this is all because media, they can't escape the reality of
Ever
the
since the Arab
West.
Spring, and actually ever since the 60s, it's become obvious that these fragmenting media that do all these bad things are also capable in another context of doing all this wonderful spontaneous organizing in the cause of justice things.
Mm-hmm.
What all this amounts to is that when you say, what did you say? Reality is what? What was the
Reality remains
Yes, right.
undefeated.
That's all of which goes back to that, and all of which leads me back to the whole medicine analogy. And once again, my ultimate position is it's a very elitist one. I think there are certain individuals, in not all, but most, including like you just pointed out, the whole Christian conservative. There are certain individuals who really are committed in their hearts to something like an ideal of universal justice. And somehow or other, those people need to get together and talk and make a group of their own, regardless of the content of their beliefs, around that commitment. And then ask the questions that you've been putting out there today.
Is that humanism? Would that
That's
be
exactly what humanism should be. Perfect. And classically, again, in Kant and the original modern Western humanists, that's exactly what humanism was. It got all fucked up because it became an ideology of conquest. We're going to help these poor, nobody
right?
to become fully human like us. But nature doesn't care. Most people suck. Reality is undefeated, but medicine is still a good thing. I'm summarizing my point.
Our conversation. There's so much in this chapter because there's a lot of things that I want to talk to you about, and I think we'll just pick it up so we're not starting new topics in the next issue or next.
Appreciate that.
But because there are evolutions of things that you talk about in this that I like to make the connections between I'm a very online person, capital V, capital O,
really?
as they call them.
Okay.
And so because I'm constantly immersed in this discourse, I like to see how your book about mediation has evolved and how these things have evolved. And I was talking to Maggie before we started talking, and there's a whole conversation I want to have with you about. I don't know if you've heard about this term like current thingism. And it's just, you talk about it in this chapter briefly. You make this reference to what I would say is current thingism. There are just too many different things out there and too many different things happening and so fast. Things in general aren't comprehensible. No one can attend to it all, let alone comprehend it in a vision. That's just a fact. And this is what I would say has evolved into this idea of current thingism, where it's like now everyone has a Ukraine flag. Now everybody has it's whatever is the current thing. So that's a discussion I'd want to have with you next time as we talk about identity politics and There was something else that I noted. Oh, the flattery inherent in representation, which is really just the theme of this
Yeah, that's the
entire
key to
book.
the whole thing. Yeah,
And now mix that with identity
that's right.
politics. And then I don't know if you've heard of this term, audience capture.
Nope.
Okay, so this is another thing I
Okay.
want to talk to you about, and you can start just thinking
All
about
right.
it for the next time. Essentially, audience capture happens, and I was talking to my friend the other day about
Oh,
how
I think
Twitter
I know what's gonna. It's sticky
Twitter
eyeballs.
is breaking people's
Yes,
brains,
yes,
essentially.
sir.
Psychologically, I've watched a lot of really good minds like completely break, and it's because of, and I was realizing this reading your book, I'm like, it's flattery. They literally lose their minds, and I'm seeing this actually even with Elon, who I would say is like mainlining flattery at the moment, and how dangerous it is to a human brain to have that much flattery, because they're only hearing the there's nothing that can
Yeah,
penetrate this identity that they associate with and presenting themselves, especially people who are very online. And audience capture is basically when you're regurgitating, and I think everyone has to be so careful of this. It's why I love having conversations with you. You push back against,
I just
we're all in our
right,
little,
right.
bubbles, and you start, because like you said, the attention
Yeah,
economy, and I would say the grievance economy as well, which I try very hard to stay out
yeah.
of. You start feeding your audience the red meat,
Mhm,
and they
mhm.
respond, and the algorithms will lead you where you don't want to lose money or
Yeah,
followers.
yeah.
So that's something that's really new and fascinating to me,
But
because
it's an intensification of what was already there.
right,
Okay, that's important to realize that a whole lot of what we're looking at is intensifying
right.
to the point where if you step way back to the flattery of representation idea, which the way I deal with it in the book is that it's been with us since long before there was media of any kind, anything like what we've got today. But the flattery of being represented to others, that's always been there.
Mhm.
And so, what happens is these technologies, these devices, these venues, these platforms, you know, pop up, and then nobody's planning it. And then they hook into this inclinations that we've already got,
Right.
and we're off
I loved that quote. I think about it all the time. Everyone's famous in their
in the
tribe.
tribe. That's Robert
In the
Murphy, an
tribe.
anthropologist who's long passed away. That's his line, not mine. I'm quoting. Yes,
Mhm.
yes. And yeah,
Yeah,
it's such an
that
important
sticks with
distinction, and
me.
it should stick with us because that's the context within which human nature, such as it is, natural, such as it is, became what it is.
Yeah.
There used to be just small communities when humans were becoming human beings. That was the context in which they became human beings.
Mhm.
And a lot of what's going on now is what happens to human beings who became what they are in that context when all of a sudden they're living in, oh, press a button, I can look at that dwarf star exploding millions of light years away. That's cool.
So
I'll
crazy.
go to this other thing.
Yeah. It's so wild too to see. I'm really fascinated as somebody who just is, clearly fascinated with human psychology and relationship to the media, watching the richest man in the world buy this media platform and use it like a pleb.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like he's using it
Yeah.
like one of
Yeah.
us. And it's fascinating to me to see the flattery of
Yeah,
representation, the
that's
people
such a good example. I mean,
who he,
yeah,
and
no.
even just the shine of him interacting with someone.
Compared to the big time compared to Bill Gates and even what's his face, this Facebook guy, Musk.
Zuckerberg.
He's so obvious, it's ridiculous. Anyway, uh, times times times
Time's
times
time's a
passing. Yeah,
wasting.
and we're gonna do It's not a wasting, but I'm running out of it,
Yeah.
and we're gonna pick this up again soon.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I mean,
I'll,
we are just halfway through this chat, not even halfway. So I so appreciate these
I
conversations
do
with
too. I
you.
do too. It's
They're
it's
just fascinating to me, and thank you for
very
your
satisfying
time
to
always.
talk to somebody who kind of understands what's going on. It's really important.
I don't understand.
Well, you
anything.
compared to when the book first came out. I'm not even going to name. I could drop a few big names, and the interviews were like, because they didn't know what they were asking. All right. So
Yeah.
anyway, Bridget, I gotta split.
Okay.
So much.
All month long on Pluto TV, stream the biggest Tyler Perry movies free. Watch your favorites like Medea's Witness Protection and Medea's Big Happy Family. Join Tyler Perry as he goes on a couples retreat with Sharon Leal in Why Did I Get Married? Or Idris Elba and Gabrielle Union in the Tyler Perry directed film Daddy's Little Girls. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies and TV shows. Available on live and on demand. Download the free Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming now. Pluto TV. Drop in, watch free.
It's time for the weekly check-in with Bridget and cousin Maggie.
Hello.
How was your vacation? Have we talked about that?
No, not at all. Because I think our last check-in was recorded before the break.
Oh, right.
Yeah. My
Oh.
vacation was lovely. I spent, some good downtime with the family. My brother and sister-in-law were there, staying at my parents' house too. And then, just had some good time with my parents.
Was it idyllic and magical as your...
It was pretty nice,
Nice.
We had a little snow, but we did not get the blizzard that mostly missed us. We got rain, which was great. And then, saw some friends. It was all just wonderful. Can't beat it.
I had a very nice Christmas too.
Yeah. What'd you guys do?
Well, we have family here,
Right.
so it was very nice. I thought I'd get more done.
Yeah.
And I forgot that my husband works in healthcare and doesn't get days off. Those things called days off. So he worked, and then it was just me and baby, which was fun. But as you know, from even just a couple of hours, it's
it's a whole thing.
it's a full-time thing.
And I know you were looking forward to some writing time or whatnot, but that didn't really happen.
No, and that's okay. It's probably for the best, honestly, just so that I was able to, I was forced to just take a break and let my brain relax a little bit and not be so output. I still launched Write Club.
I know.
Because I was psycho.
I definitely did a lot I was home, because nothing stops.
Nothing stops.
It was a lot. I was working a lot more than even I thought I would, but it was
You're a business owner now, Maggie.
It was fine. It was good. I was like, it's all stuff I want to be doing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And you get to do it from home.
Right.
Not many people would be able to just work from home at their leisure.
Right. And then
It's trade-offs.
and it's just, it's easier to get stuff done that you have to get done when you're just answering to yourself. Where you're like, I have to get this done. It's on me. No one's going to be checking over my shoulder about it, but I know I need to get it done. So
Yeah. Some people wouldn't find that easier. Some people need the accountability.
yeah. I guess the accountability is to you and to our audience, but
Yeah.
I don't want to let you guys down.
Yeah. Yeah, it was nice. I'm still somebody on Instagram she's a real estate agent friend of mine that I follow, and she's crazy and a workaholic, and that first week I love, and then the second week in between Christmas and New Year's I start going nuts, and she posted some TikTok on Instagram or whatever, and she was like, me waiting for after the new year to get back to work. And that's very much me in that week. I start getting very stir crazy and ready to hit the ground running.
See, I feel like I worked the whole first week. So it was the second week that I got to take a little time and see friends and see people. So that it's always easier to see people after Christmas too.
I agree.
So that was kind of my week off.
Too much downtime.
Couple
for
days off. Yeah.
This brain. Yeah, so then I launched Right Club because I'm a psycho. I'm like, I don't have enough to do. I don't know what made me do it. It just seemed like a good idea. And now it's been, what's weird is that I reframed it for me. I'm doing the prompts instead of trying to force myself to do them in the morning, I'm doing them at night. And for some reason that like shift has changed my ability to do them.
There's some that's true of a lot of things too. I think you have to find what time works for you when you can do certain things.
Yeah, and I wanted to get them done so that other people could do them in their morning.
Right.
So I do it the night before. And the mornings are a little bit dodgy. I never know when she's going to get up. And
right.
if she had a rough night, we might sleep in later than I would like, but I need the sleep if she's still sleeping. So,
right.
But nighttime, she's pretty good for the early part of the night. So now it reminds me a lot of when I used to write. And I would write like between 8 and midnight.
And I feel like you reframed it too in your own mind of, like, I just have to sit down for 5 minutes.
Yeah, and it's always longer.
It's always longer, but that gets you in the chair where it's like, if that's your bar that you're setting, you can sit down. You can find 5 minutes.
I can find 5 minutes, although it is like anything on the internet, the posting of it is always like a freaking thing.
Longer, but
yeah.
But still, I think that finding that motivation to be like, I just need to sit down for 5 minutes, find 5 minutes to write, and then you can go longer, but it's that gets your butt in the chair.
And even if I'm exhausted, I know if I do my 5 minutes, then that's enough.
Yeah.
I can just leave the thought, hanging.
But you've checked it off your list and succeeded.
It's a good way for me to end the day too, because usually what I do is I post the writing prompt for the next day, and then I'll go and read what everybody's been writing from the prompt that day. Which is like amazing, brilliant essays, by the way, that people have been writing.
Yeah.
Have you read some of these?
I've read some of them where
There's
I'm like, there's so many. So a lot of time I'm like, I'll just kind of.
I went back to the one from yesterday. Some seem to strike more of a chord than others, but I went back to the one from yesterday, and there were like 35 essays. I'm not kidding, like full blown essays on the prompt
in Phetasy. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, some of them in Substack, I'm like, I've been reading the Substack comments.
Substack is growing. It's just not, we're more established.
Engaged. Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't have the same ability that exists on Phetasy where people can interact with each other in the same way. But I also we've been there longer. We have a whole community there, and they're very engaged. I'd like to see the same thing on Substack as well. Because I like it over there too. So
I did do one of the prompts. I'm
like,
all
really?
Right, yeah.
Which one did you do?
The music one. The song.
Yeah, I love that one. That was a popular. I think they're like 40. I should look. That one was
loved yours too, because Tiger Lily. Oh my God, that song. I can just hear that song. San Andreas. It's just.
I know. It's just like I can hear her. And then I put it on repeat when I was writing it. That helped me.
Yeah, it's such a specific time in my life.
Oh, it was really interesting because I was talking to. It's funny how I can use this podcast to work out a lot of what I'm trying to write about. And I was talking to Michael Shermer at the end of the podcast. We got into the "I regret being a slut" piece, which just kind of came up. He started asking me about it. And we were talking about the remembered self versus the experienced self, which is something I've been struggling with as I've been trying to write this book, because he was like, is it just that, and you and I have talked this way, like in the moment, was that some of that man eating like a persona? And if you're lying to yourself in that time, are you really lying to yourself? Like,
you believed it.
If you lie to yourself and you believe it, is it a lie?
Right.
Even if later on in life you can recognize that you were. So
we thought it was true about yourself.
We were having this like interesting conversation about that and how teasing that out is hard. But I think this is something that when I was writing that piece with music, it is that same feeling where you can have a feeling evoked and it's like nostalgia, but at the same and then I remember, but I was in such a different place when I loved that song. And I don't even know if I'm remembering it accurately.
Yeah. Well, mine was
That's why journals are so important.
Yeah, for you especially because you have it all documented. But mine was interesting because when I was writing about the music, I have this visceral memory of this moment in time listening to a song. Like I was stoned. I was in a car in my freshman year of college, and we were like cruising down a highway, and it was dark and all the windows are down, but it was cold out, and like Dave Matthews Two Step was blasting, and it was like I can close my eyes and be in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote about that, but it's just like,
Did you post it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see it.
In the comments. But I'm like, I could be remembering it entirely wrong.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, that is just something I can still close my eyes and experience. So I was like, just trying to, but then I almost wrote about our first road trip together and you introducing me to Ani DeFranco. But I was just kind of like, this one was more a visceral remembrance, but I just came across like when I was home, my mom made me clean out all these boxes in the attic.
Mixtape?
No, I found our little document, our ledger of this road trip we took, which we I wrote
We've
down.
always been morons who get lost. That's what I realized.
And so I wrote, and I knew I had it somewhere, and I've been looking for it for years, and I found this thing, and I was just remembering that trip, but I almost wrote about you introducing me to Ani DeFranco, because I'll never forget that either.
Ugh. God, I love her.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I want to see that.
Yeah, and I found a letter you wrote me too, which was hilarious. I've got to bring those over and we can laugh.
We should read parts of the log that we kept.
We should, yeah.
For the audience. Yeah, it's good to be back though. I'm much better when I'm in a routine of some kind. And
yeah, it's definitely good to be back. I'm like, I feel like I'm still came back and just dove right in. So, and especially trying to get this week's dumpster fire out was like an odyssey. So then it fucked me up for yesterday, and I'm still trying to recover from that. So I'm like, all right, I still got to get back into my workout routine and stuff like that.
This whole week has been a little bit off. A little bit off.
We released a damn dumpster fire, and that's all that counts.
And now it's getting stepped on by the algorithm.
It really is. It got crushed.
Maggie's like, I'm not sure if it's the talk about killing yourself or the fats talk, but
the fake suicide talk or the fats, talking about the fats.
Probably both. My guess is the algorithm. I want to personify the algorithm where it's bad.
Yeah. This is not allowed.
Yeah, the algorithm is picky. I always joke about how we must feed the algorithm, and it's it's very picky eater.
Yeah.
I don't like this. Well,
we're back.
We're back. Happy 2023.
Here we go.
I can't believe it's 2023.
It's going to be a big year.
Or it's going to be maybe it'll just be.
It's going to be a big year, Bridget.
Maybe it'll just be a peaceful year.
This is going to be the year you write your book.
Let's not put too much pressure on me. Tune in next week for another riveting episode that will change your life, help you get out of your own way, and solve all the world's problems. I want to thank our composer, Jared Elias, my co-producer and cousin, Maggie, and all of you out there listening. This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.